Hello, everybody, for part two of Schlock, and not so much awe. Look at still the Yoo-hoo part of the sandwich we're talking about, and we're going to get to the other half of the sandwich in this part, looking at an update on Shane Warne. But first, just picking up where I left off, and then we'll go into a look at the financial markets, which might be a little dry, I realize, but I believe are at the heart of what we're seeing, at the heart of this transition that we're seeing from one period of time to another. And I left off here with this transition of Jupiter into gate 2022, and it's still in this line 1 second class ticket. So it's this ability to handle a more subservient position and this quality of behavior best suited to handling mundane or trivial situations. And interesting how that might be playing out in the real world. I certainly have noticed things quieting down a little bit, and that, you're seeing now that Zelensky going to Congress and trying to handle these kind of the mundanity now to keep the protection and his defense going. So he's meeting with different leaders. He spoke to Congress, and it's interesting to see how this is going to be playing out. And it'll be interesting too when Jupiter crosses over into this gate 36. How, again, we're going to see more shifts in the tone and news flow as we go through. But, make no mistakes, we are in this Piscean sea, this water, this fog of war that is really obfuscating a lot of our what really matters in our life. So in part one, I was talking a lot about yellow journalism and the distractions and the hair triggering responses that we have when we see news on the telly and hear things on the radio, but particularly the television, those visual images and cues. We have this tendency to just react before really stopping to analyze what we're really seeing. And in this era or this time of a lot of fogginess, it is more imperative than ever to notice your reactions and not start letting them snowball or take over your life in any way, shape, or form, because it's a distraction. What is happening in Ukraine, unless there is a nuclear war eventually, that a bomb drops in your neighborhood, how much of this is really going to directly affect your life? How much of this is a distraction? And I wager that the financial system changing and our economic system changing is much, much more important to be looking at and learning about in these times. But that's not glamorous, it's not sexy, it's not anything you could really do yellow journalism about unless the Dow Jones falls, 5,000 points. We saw huge volatility in the London metals market, which I'll get to. But do you think that's ever going to be on the front pages? Are you kidding me? And yet, what happens in the industrial metals market, it will have a greater effect on our lives than, again, what is going on in Ukraine. So there's a real, completely things out of whack in this media environment right now. We're getting, the tops of things, we're getting things peeking below the surface, and underneath here, it's a whole city teeming with life and issues, and we really don't know what's going on. But keep an eye on the financials and the economic system and changes there. We had in the U.S. the Federal Reserve, which is the big Western central bank, raising interest rates for the first time since 2018, with inflation now at an 8% year-on-year level. That's the highest since 1982, and I believe it's probably higher than that. This is the official number, but to me this just shows it's probably double that or something. And they have failed at their mandate. So Jay Powell, who is head of the Federal Reserve, just gave his press conference and admitted they weren't following their mandate, a congressional mandate of price stability, and they kept that at a 2% level, and that's way above that now at 8%. And so he has to admit that they're behind that they've dropped the ball to some extent. But, he was rationalizing in his press conference that there was this sudden burst of inflation. Well, dream on. There was no sudden burst of inflation. This has been slowly happening over the years. The dog has a lot to say about this too, so I'm hoping she gets over her excitement. What was interesting about his news conference, and again, I'm just noting here, he used to give a press conference in person, and he started that. He started this press conference. No, I take that back. He started a press conference after every meeting. So there's 7 or 8 meetings a year, and he came out and said, I want a press conference after each of those meetings, where before that, for Janet Yellen, it was like once a quarter or something like that. And he said, no, I want a press conference every meeting. I want to be really accessible to the public. And that ended sharply in 2020. And I find it so interesting that as the world is getting back to normal and things are opening up, that you still have Washington, D.C., in this virtual world. From what I understand, the Treasury Department isn't open. People are still working remote from there. I know the Social Security Department, they're still working remote. And you have Jay Powell, he's not giving press conferences and is the man not behind the curtain, but he's in front of this curtain, and it has a green screen effect almost to it. But he's not really meeting people face to face. There's nothing like that. And listening through his press conference, I would also wager that the questions were so abstract. And, for such a situation we're in, they were so presented in such a boring way, with people nitpicking, well, okay, the median forecast of U.S. interest rates is at 1.9% by the end of the year, but going into tight conditions at 2.8% by the end of 2023 before descending to a neutral rate of 2.4% after 2024. Does this align with your views? And are we overshooting long-term neutral rates? Are they now loaded? Do you think it's back-loaded or front-loaded? What? I don't even understand this. And I was a financial journalist for years. How do you expect an average American who has a million things on their mind to find this in any way relevant or informative? The Fed couldn't predict anything, let alone, coming out with these projections for the next 2 to 3 years of where they think interest rates are going to be. And let's face it, we've been, this economy has been based on low interest rates. So now they're moving them up higher. And the question is, they're really limited. They're very limited on what they can do. They can't admit this. They can't admit and say they really don't know what to do now. Because again, he's the man in front of the velvet curtain here. And he can't do that. If anything, he says he's fully committed to bringing inflation down and higher growth. Well, how are you going to do that? How in the world are you going to do that? Which is why they really have no option but to go to a digital currency. And it was interesting today, and I watched most of the press conference that dipped out on CNBC, so I didn't catch maybe all the questions. From what I heard most of it. I did not hear one question from the media on digital currencies or cryptocurrencies. If I heard it, the CNBC dipped out of that, but it wasn't for long. I didn't hear anything. And yet this is what we're talking about here. With the Federal Reserve has already had its white paper on this whole issue. And now Biden, the administration, is taking the next step forward. And again, I said in part 1, again, just so interesting, the coincidence here of CBDC, which is part of CBD, which is part of the oil that is in marijuana, and it's a significant ingredient of it. And the legal status of this CBD oil is certainly in flux. It's not as uniform as you might think, and there are incredible, negative side effects to this, as well as safety concerns. But we're making this legal now, and I do not think it is any accident that they made marijuana legal in many states in the run up to 2020. I think they want people self-medicating right now. it's in their interest that you self-medicate and that you're not aware of things and that you're sitting in front of the tube, watching things and passively responding. There's no accident in that. So there's no mention of this in by our reporters, nothing, not a word. And yet Joe Biden last week said his administration places the highest urgency on research and development efforts into the potential design and deployment options of a U.S. CBDC. They put this order asking for a variety of agencies to begin research and submit report on a variety of issues surrounding digital currencies, from design and security to financial and societal impacts. We know the implications of potentially issuing a digital dollar are profound. They're extraordinarily wide-ranging, a senior administration official told reporters on a call on Tuesday. Although a digital dollar would not necessarily change much in terms of everyday experiences like buying goods and services, economists say it could transform central and commercial banking, as well as government sanctions, banking accessibility, and taxes, as well as social issues. This is what the big concern has been about social credit. And I guess why I'm bringing this up is because, again, there is no discussion on this whatsoever. If you think that the authorities, that the power that be, are going to say, hey, this is top on our mind now, we need to be talking about this instead of Ukraine. Powell started his press conference by talking about Ukraine. And again, I lived through many wars the U.S. started. I don't remember any company executive or public sector employee carrying on about this the way they are about Ukraine now. I just don't remember. And that is not his responsibility, Ukraine. He even said that in the press conference at one point. He can't really talk about economic sanctions on Russia, though he supports them. He wouldn't go down that hole of talking about the economic implications on the U.S. about that. So, it very conveniently, the stagecraft of not meeting with reporters, still having this virtual world, as we talk about probably one of the most momentous thing, changing our currency to a digital world. So it's just all going digital. We're all in the metaverse now, whether we know it or not. They're going to push us there, kicking and screaming. I want to talk about, incidentally, the London metals market. So with these economic sanctions that were placed on Russia, or partially, that caused raw goods to go up dramatically. And again, keep in mind, before Russia, U.S. inflation was at 8%. And now you have a major producer of industrial metals, oil, wheat, corn, crops, grains, economic sanctions on them. So they're going to be limited on what they can buy from the outside world. And they are now responding and retaliating by limiting what they're going to sell to the world. And this caused the industrial metals market, so it's not gold or silver, not precious metals, but industrial metals to rise dramatically. And what is so concerning about this was at the London metals market. What is concerning about this is not the fact that prices went skyrocket, which is concerning from an inflation point of view, but what happened was the knock-on effect that the London metals market was unable to function properly through this. So this fella, this Luke Sadrian, was quoted in a Bloomberg article on this. And so let me read it to you. Larry Sadrian, who's, been, the LME, he says, has been my bread and butter for a long time. He's been in this market for about 30 years. He was shocked by its decision to suspend nickel trading on last Tuesday morning and cancel all the transactions from earlier in the day. Now, in the middle of a scorching bull market that's lifted prices to record highs, some in the industry are simply deciding to walk away. So there's three things really concerning that this is going to add to the inflationary price pressures that we're seeing. So, a scorching bull market, a bull market means prices are going up. Okay, so that's concerning in and of itself. But what really is the true nugget of concern is that the London Metals Exchange canceled all the transactions from earlier in the day. So when you cancel a contract at a futures market, you are negating your very existence for being an exchange. An exchange is supposed to, it's a regulatory body that handles counterparty risk, and that is guaranteeing that the seller and buyer, that those trades equal at the end of the day, and that it's all legitimate. And they canceled those transactions. This is huge. And so this has had a knock-on effect with some in the industry are simply to decide to walk away. Well, the people in the industry deciding to walk away are the speculators and hedge funds, which I know get a huge bad rap. But keep in mind, you do not have functioning markets if you don't have speculators in them. These are guys and gals who are putting their own money at risk to make trades because they see profits. They see advantages in getting profits. Now, trades can go the other way and they can lose money. They're willing to take that risk in, say, they might have 4 major great trades that year of profits that they can then afford to then take maybe other trades where they maybe lose a little bit of money. They're deciding now, since these trades were canceled, legitimate trades canceled the next day, that they're walking away. And how could you blame them? How could you blame them? It's like doing business with your, say, a car dealer, and you've signed a contract that you're going to exchange a car at that price, and they say, well, no, wait a minute. Industrial metals really rose, nickel's up, and if you have an electric car, nickel's hugely important to that. Oh, no, prices went up 20% overnight. I'm sorry, we have to tear apart that contract and we have to charge you 20% more. I mean, how can you do business? How can you function like this? And what I said yesterday too about Mercury being in Pisces, and Mercury is the planet of communication and commerce. It has to do with commerce, and it has to do with business. And you have Mercury now in those beginning degrees with the Sun and Neptune. So this might just be this enduring crisis. This might just be in which decline is a natural but not enduring stage. This could be wiped away. We could be getting over this whole thing. With the London metals market, the market's just not functioning. This could be, a temporary thing. It's a crisis, but not enduring. And it's needed to, say, flush out weak speculators or what have you. But I will posit the market did open again today, and within minutes there was a quote unquote technical glitch in industrial prices. So LME resumed nickel trading contracts this morning after extreme price volatility last week. Okay, right. A technical glitch shortly thereafter, though, prompted the exchange to temporarily halt the market once again before reopening at 2 p.m. London time. It marks yet another embarrassing setback for the LME. And this is a story on CNBC. Well, I would say embarrassing is really the least of it. If the exchange cannot honor contracts and they don't have enough liquidity from enough speculators, this is something not functioning on a very deep level. And this is the real story here. Something seriously wrong. And then, they say, oh, it was a systems error. What does a technical glitch and systems error mean? I might as well talk about Mercury and Pisces. It's like, that you get, that are is more, and Sun and Neptune and, near Mercury. That has more validity almost than a news story saying it's a technical glitch or systems error. What they're not telling you is that there's this basic price mechanism of matching buyer to seller and making sure their contracts match at the end of the day has broken down. And nobody wants to say this. Nobody wants to say this. So again, this is a serious thing. This is having a knock-on effect. And this Luke Sadrian, this was last week when he said this. Given the current uncertainty, I am exiting all of my LME positions despite being ragingly bullish on copper. Okay, I haven't called Luke Sadrian. I haven't followed up on specifically what he's saying about today's systems errors, but I'm very curious. But stories are not linking this clearly. The buyers and sellers, the contracts are not being honored. So people like Luke Sadrian, who make their money providing cash to make sure it's fluid in the market's function. A nickel producer doesn't want to speculate. A nickel producer is looking in the future going, I need X amount of tons of nickel to make batteries for electric vehicles. And I really want to ramp up production in the summertime when energy prices to fuel my big plants will be down. So I am buying June futures contracts at this level to lock in a price. And if that price is then not honored, if that contract is not honored, you have a dysfunctional market. You have a mechanisms just breaking down here. And then, you have Joe Biden and Janet Yellen, who's the head of the Treasury, at the helm of all this, basically. I mean, look at Janet Yellen. Poor Janet Yellen. I mean, I've met her. I've seen her. I went to her press conferences. She never had this hangdog look. She looks absolutely like the air's been sucked out of her a little. This downturned mouth. I've never seen this. These long creases in the face. I've never seen this. Look at the eyes. Just what has she gotten herself into? And she knows. She's a bright woman. She knows what's going on, but how much can she do with, Biden at the helm? Let's go Brandon. And who the administration now looking at digital dollars. Because all of this is breaking down, and they know this is all breaking down. And that's why I said in my first video in a long time the other day, they almost have to go to another system. And what I object to this is not so much, maybe a digital dollar is better. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is the way to go. But what I'm objecting to now is the deception in which and the covert nature in which this is all playing out, because this is not being done in the public the way you would think. Again, Jay Powell just had a press conference today, and I realize this is probably really boring for a lot of you, and you didn't watch the press conference because it's boring. Because they ask boring questions. The press asks these boring questions that are not relevant, But why not open this to, why shouldn't this be on the front page? Why isn't this? That you're changing money and you're changing a major our economic and financial framework. So you're changing it now to CBDCs. And you're getting rid of this era of globalization. With CBDCs, it's going to be blockchain and decentralization. So this whole globalization push, which I was brought into in the 1990s, and I drunk the Kool-Aid on this for a long time. This was the cool thing, globalization. This was going to save us. This was going to increase everybody's profits. This was going to help the standard of living everywhere in the world. That's debatable. And that replaced that has run in tandem with the whole petrodollar system that we ran on. So we made the switch. Before that, it was the gold standard. And in the 70s, it went from the gold standard, where your dollars were backed by gold, to petrodollars and the Federal Reserve note. The Federal Reserve note, which we think of as dollars, is not really a dollar. It's a note that the Federal Reserve is lending us, and it's not backed by gold. And the way it's able to circulate in the world is because the price of oil is based on that. But this is going the way of the dodo. Bye-bye. Bye-bye globalization. And it's leading up to CBDCs. And it almost has to go that way because all of this is broken down. It's broken down. And again, I resent not that they want to make a switch. I mean, life changes. Maybe this is better. We're already using Apple Pay. We're already using Zelle. We're using Venmo. We're already, to some degree, paying digitally. And, certainly my kids, they're much more used to, doing everything off their phone. Okay, you could debate that. What I object to is that this is, again, being done under the fog of war, and that it's very thick, and that, we are being, squished and mushed between the Wuhan Yoo-hoo sandwich here. And it's messy and it's obfuscating a lot. But think about it. They have no choice but to do things like this. They have to do things covertly because they're the same people who were managing things for the last 20, 30 years. Jay Powell's been around forever. Joe Biden's been around forever. Janet Yellen's been around forever. I mean, these are just some of the players in the US. I'm not even getting into Europe, and I'm not even touching on Australia or China, but I'm just talking strictly in the US. These players have been here for decades. They're all, in their elder years. They've all been telling us and propping up the system, through different spending plans and congressional spending plans. And Congress just passed another $1.5 trillion in an omnibus bill with more money going to Ukraine, which is not going to go to the Ukraine people. It's going to go into the NGO, into the banking system there, to then prop up the puppet governments in Ukraine. So they continue to be the vassal states of NATO, and particularly the US. But this is having a cost on us, the American people, with inflation going higher. The more you're printing this money and dispersing it, and it's being spent, that's the velocity of money, you're going to have inflation. And so I object to all of this being done in the fog of war. And I object to the deception. And again, if I were them, I would want it this way too. I would want it this way too, because again, they've been for the last 40 years propping up this system and complicit in its imbalances and distortions. And so what are they going to say now? And furthermore, it would beg the question from us saying, well, you were in control before and it was a mess. Why should we entrust you to do the digital dollar? Why wouldn't we hire a new set of players to do it? Oh, no. It's been a complete mess, but they want the same players to be handling the new round in the new era and keep it all in one big happy family or political party or whatnot. And it doesn't matter what party you support. It's the same 1% at the top that will benefit or will arrange it and create laws that it benefits them. Believe you me. It's not going to be for our benefit. And why should it be? If it was, they would be including us in this. I'm going to leave it there. I think that's a lot. I'm going to do a part 3 soon, and that's going to get into my new info on Shane Warne, and I'm going to look at Hailey Bieber too. So thank you very much.